We continue now at the top of Daf Tzadi Aleph Amid Beis in Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 91b. On the previous summit, there was a machlokas tanoim in the Mishnah whether one can donate oil to the Beis HaMikdash. Rabbi Shimon said that one cannot, and Rabbi Tarfon said misnadvin shemen that one can donate oil. And the Gemara now says Amar Shmuel. Shmuel says L'divrei Rabbi Tarfon, according to the opinion of Rabbi Tarfon, hamisnadev shemen, one who donates oil to the Beis HaMikdash komso, he takes a fistful and he burns that on the mizbeach v'shirav nechol, and then the remainder is eaten. Rashi explains Amar Shmuel hamisnadev shemen l'divrei Rabbi Tarfon komso umaktir hakometz, the kometz is burned v'shirav necholin, and again the remainder is eaten. And the Gemara says my time, and what's the reason for this? Amar Krotz, because the pasuk says korban mincha. It says korban mincha melamid shemisnadvin shemen. This pasuk teaches us that one can donate oil. V'chi mincha, and it is similar to a mincha. Ma mincha komsa v'shireh necholin, just like by a mincha one takes a fistful, burns it on the mizbeach, and the remainder is eaten. Af shemen, so too with regards to the oil, komso, he takes a fistful, v'shirav necholin, and the remainder is eaten. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Zeira. Rabbi Zeira says, Afa non amitanina. We learn this in the Mishnah as well, because what does the Mishnah say? Amar Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon says, Imroisa shemen shemischalik ba'azara. If one sees shemen that's being distributed in the azar, it's being eaten. Iatat lishol mahu. You don't have to ask what it is. Elamoser rekike minchas Yisrael. It's the leftover or the remainder of the wafer minchas of Yisrael. Velog shemen shel mitzora, or it's from the log shemen shel mitzora. She'ein misnadvin, because we know it's not a donation, because there are no donations according to Rabbi Shimon. And now michlal, so that would imply demand amar misnadvin, that the one who does hold there are donations, mischalik, that it is divided, the oil is given out in order to be eaten, because that would be the contrasting opinion to Rabbi Shimon. But the Gemara continues, Amar le Abaya. Abaya said to him, he said to Rabbi Zeira, what do you mean? Ema Seifa, why don't you look at the end of the Mishnah? You can make the exact opposite inference. It says at the end of the Mishnah, Im roisa shemen shenitan al gabe ha'ishim, if you see oil that's placed on the fire, iatat sarech lishol mahu, you don't need to ask what it is. Elamosa rekike minchas kohanim, it's the remainder of the wafers of the minchas kohanim, uminchas kohen Mashiach, and the mincha of the kohen gadol, she'ein misnadvin shemen, because again, oil is not donated. And michlal, that would imply, delamand amar misnad, that the one who says that it is donated, kulan leishim, that it goes to the fire, it's all burned on the mizbeach. And the Gemara says le Abaya kasha reisha. According to Abaya, the beginning of the Mishnah is difficult, and le Rabbi Zeira kasha seif. According to Rabbi Zeira, the end of the Mishnah is difficult. But the Gemara says b'shalom le Rabbi Zeira. Actually, it works out according to Rabbi Zeira, because reisha b'shirayim, because again the beginning of the Mishnah, which is talking about oil that is distributed in the azar to be eaten, that would be the remainder. Rabbi Zeira says there's a part that is burned on the mizbeach, which is the fistful, and there's a part that is eaten. So the beginning is talking about the part that is eaten. And Seifa bekometz, the end of the Mishnah might be talking just about the fistful, which is burned on the mizbeach. So Rabbi Zeira actually can learn the entire Mishnah. Elali Abaya kasha, but according to Abaya, we still have a difficulty, because according to Abaya, again, kasha reisha, the beginning of the Mishnah, which says that it's distributed, that is difficult. Abaya says it's all burned on the mizbeach. And the Gemara says, Tana reisha atu seifa. Well, the reisha is being taught because of the seifa. In other words, the main part where you should make the inference is the seifa. According to Abaya, really it is burned on the mizbeach, and the reisha is just being taught because of the seifa. But the Gemara says bishlama seifa. Now I can understand saying that the end of the Mishnah tani misham reisha. I understand that you would bring an end case because of the beginning case, and you should really make your inference from the beginning case. Ela reisha misham seifa mitani. Would we ever learn a reisha because of a seifa? And the Gemara says in yes, amri b'ma'arava, they say in the West, tana reisha misham seifa. Sometimes the beginning is learned because of the end. And Rashi explains, Tana Reisha Misham Seifa teaches the beginning because of the end. It means to say as follows, Reisha Tani Gabe Shaman HaMeschalik, the Reisha, which says by oil which is distributed, Iyat Tzarech Lishal Ma'u, you don't need to ask what it is, Kedei Nas, but that line is just being brought along the way. Dinami Misnadvin Shemen, because even if oil was donated, Eino Meschalik, it wouldn't be distributed. Elamisham Deboy Lemisni Seifa, but since at the end of the Mishnah it wants to say, Imrisa Shemen Nitan Al Gabe Hoishim, that if you see oil on the fire, Iyat Tzarech L'Savka Ben Adava, you don't have to doubt, you don't have to think that it might be an adava, she'ein misnadvin shemen, because there are no donations of oil, there the dafka ashmin, and that really is specifically teaching it that way. The ilu lamanda amar misnadvin, no sin, because according to the one who says misnadvin, so then it would be placed on the fire, and so tana reisha nami imrisa shemen mischalik. That's why the beginning says if you see oil divided, but again, it is the seifa which should be taken seriously in terms of the inference. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, Tashma, coming here a proof from the following brisa in terms of whether when one donates oil, according to Rabbi Tarfon, is it entirely burned on the Mizbeach, or is the kometz taken and only the kometz is burned on the Mizbeach? It says in the brisa, Yayin, that when it comes to wine, Kedivrei Rabbi Akiva, according to Rabbi Akiva, L'Sefalim, that wine gets poured into the basins, meaning when that wine is donated to the Beis HaMikdash, to the Mizbeach, and Shemen, when it comes to oil, Kedivrei Rabbi Tarfon, according to Rabbi Tarfon, who says that one can donate oil, L'Ishim, so that goes to the fire. And the Gemara says, My lav, is it not? Midiyayin kulo l'sefalim, from the fact that all of the wine is poured to the basins, so Shemen kulo l'Ishim, doesn't that imply that the oil entirely goes to the fire? The Gemara says, Midi iri, is that necessarily true? Hakidi isa v'hakidi isa, this one is as it is, and this one is as it is, meaning the wine is kulo l'sefalim, but it's possible that that's not true by the Shemen. It's possible by the Shemen that it is only the kometz. And Rashi explains, Yayin Kedir Rabbi Akiva, the Amar b'Meseches Menachos. This is Rabbi Akiva in Menachos. He says, Misnadvin Yayin ve'in Misnadvin Shemen. He says, you donate wine, but you cannot donate Shemen. Also Yayin l'sefalim hu nosen l'nesech. What you do with that wine is you pour them into the basins as libations, v'lo l'zalef al ha'ishim, and not to sprinkle them on the fire. V'hu adin l'Rabbi Tarfon b'yayin, and the same thing is true when it comes to Rabbi Tarfon's opinion by wine. Elamishum de'itzrach Shemen l'misni kedivrei Rabbi Tarfon, but since we're talking about oil, kedivrei Rabbi Tarfon, the lo listening lo stama, the Rabbi Akiva ein misnadvin shemen. You can't just say it according to everyone, unattributed, because Rabbi Akiva says you don't donate shemen. So tananami yayin kedivrei Rabbi Akiva. That's why it just uses the phrase yayin according to Rabbi Akiva. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Papa says, Kitanoi, let us say that this issue is a machlokes tanoim. The Brisa says, Shemen, when it comes to oil, lo yifchos milug, it shouldn't be less than one lug. Rebbe omer shloshes lugan, and Rebbe says, it's 3 lugan. And so, b'mai komiflagi, what are they arguing about? Amru Rabbanan kamei de Rav Papa, the Rabbanan said in front of Rav Papa, the machlokes is don mina umina, or don mina v'uki bi'asra ike beinayu. The question is, when you learn from a source, do you learn totally from that source, or do you learn from that source, but then apply within this particular context? And the explanation is as follows. The Rabbanan Savri, the Rabbanan, they hold, again, the Rabbanan are the ones that say, Lo yifchos milug, they hold, Ma mincha misnadvin, just like one can donate a mincha, Av shemen misnadvin, so to oil can be donated. Umina, and then you have to learn from there. Ma mincha log shaman, Av kan log shaman, just like a mincha is a log of oil, so too over here is a log of oil. Uma mincha komtza v'shireh nechol, and just like by mincha you take the kometz and the rest is eaten, af shemen komso v'shir of nechal, and so too by the oil you take the kmitza and the rest is eaten. V'idach, and then the other opinion holds, meaning the opinion of Rebbe, shloshes lugin, mi mincha, we do learn from mincha, ma mincha misnadvin, af shemen misnadvin, just like mincha is donated, so too oil can be donated. However, v'uki ba'asra, however you have to place it in its own context, meaning kinesachim, it should be like libations. Ma nesachim shloshes lugin, just like nesachim is 3 lug, af shemen shalosh lugin, so to oil is 3 lug. Uman nesachim kulan l'sefalin, and just like nesachim, the libations is all to the basins, af shemen, so to the oil, kulan l'ishim, it's all to the fires. And Rashi explains, Ma mincha misnadvin, just like mincha, the ikar nidvas shemen mikar mincha nafkalan, because the main idea of donating oil, the fact that you can do that, is learn from karba mincha. Usta mincha tzricha log shaman, in general, a mincha requires a log of oil, techsiv la mincha v'log shaman, that's what it says in the pasuk. Uma mincha komtza kolomer, and what this means to say is, v'kevan de islay latanakama, don mino, and yin haktar nami daininon umino ma mincha komtza. Once we're learning from mincha, we learn totally from mincha. And Rashi continues, Kinesachim, the other opinion says that we treat it in its own context like Nesachim, the Hashemin shel nedavalo karav ela b'fnei atzmo, ki yayin haba b'fnei atzmo. What do we mean its own context? Because the donated oil is similar to wine in that it comes on its own. Hilkach l'nesachim dami, therefore it's similar to libations. Uviyayin pshita lon de shloshes luganinu, when it comes to wine, it's obvious that it's 3 lug, kedenafkalon b'menachos ezrach melamid shemisnad v'yayin. That's what we learn out in Menachos. Uman nesachim kulan l'sefalim, and just like Nesachim is entirely to the basins. Kilomar kaven the Rebbe uki ba'asra islay. Since Rebbe holds you place it in its own context, lahanami uki ba'asra, for this issue also you place it in its own context. Umayayin kulo l'sefalim, just like wine is totally the basins. Av shemen delabar sefalim kulo leishim. So to oil, which is not something that you would put in the basins, that goes totally to the fires. Uviyayin pshita lan de kulo sefalim. By wine, it's obvious it goes to the basins. Vienu mischalik lekohanim. It obviously is not distributed to the kohanim. Duhamei ezra Ezrach is Rabbi, because it's included from the word Ezrach. Techsib b'nesachim kol ha'ezrach yasa kacha. It says that by the nesachim, minchas nesachim kula kol, and minchas nesachim is totally burned. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Rav Papa li Abaya. Rav Papa said to Abaya, Imi mincha maisi la Rebbe. If Rebbe actually was learning from mincha, the kuli alma don mina umina. Everyone actually would agree that you learn totally from the source. That really is not the explanation of Rebbe. The explanation of Rebbe actually is as follows: Ela Rebbe me Ezrach gamar lo. Rather, Rebbe is learning from Ezrach. And Rashi explains, Rebbe me Ezrach gamar lo lenidvas shemen. He's learning the idea of donating oil from Ezrach. V'chinami dains mino mina shloshas lugan hein. And even if you learn just from the source, it's going to be 3 lug. Shehu pacha shebin nesachim, because that's the least of all nesachim. The nesachim shall keves revias hahin yayin ksiv behu, because by the nesachim of keves it says revias hahin yayin, and so therefore, since again it's learned from Ezrach, that's where he learns the idea of 3 lug. But the Gemara continues and asks on this, Samarle Rav Huna Breder Rav Nasan Rav Papa. Rav Huna, the son of Rav Nasan, said to Rav Papa, Mimotzis Amr Hachi. Can you say that that's really the explanation of Rebbe, that he's learning from Ezrach, he's learning essentially from the Nesachim of wine? V'atanya, but we learned in a Brisa Karban Mincha. It says in the pasuk Karban Mincha, Melamid shemisnadvin shemen. It teaches us that one can donate oil. V'cham, and how much? Shlosh lugan. It's going to be 3 lug. Uman shamatle damar shlosh lugan. And who's the one that says 3 lug? Rebbe, it's Rebbe. V'kamaisi lo mikarban. And he's learning it out from the carbon. He's learning it out from Karban Mincha over here, and so therefore it does not seem that he's learning it out from Ezrach. And the Gemara says, Amar Lei said back to me, Tanya, if that is what's taught in a Brisa, then that is what's taught in a Brisa, and indeed he is not learning it out from Ezrach. And the Gemara continues, Amar Shmuel says, Hamisnadev Yayin, one who donates wine, Mevi umezalfu al gabi ha'ishim. He brings it and he sprinkles it over the fire. He doesn't pour it down those sefalim, down those basins, which bring it from the top of the mizbeach down to the bottom. And my time, what's the reason? Why is it that he sprinkles it on the fire? Amar Kro, it's because the pasuk says, V'yayin takriv lanesach chatzi hahin ishay reach nichoach l'Hashem. It says ishay reach nichoach l'Hashem. It shows that he puts it on the fire. But the Gemara says, V'hakam mechabi, but isn't he extinguishing the flames of the mizbeach? Isn't that a problem? The Gemara says, Kiboy b'mixas lo shmei kiboy. If it's just putting out a little bit, extinguishing partially is not called extinguishing. The Gemara says, Ini, is that really true? V'amar Rav Nachman amar Rabba bar Avua, but Rav Nachman said that Rabba bar Avua said, Hamord gachelas me'al gabi ha-mizbeach. If somebody takes a coal down from the mizbeach, v'chiban extinguishes it, chayiv, he is liable, and so therefore you see that partial extinguishing is in fact a problem. And the Gemara says, Deleka elahai, that case over there, that was the only coal, and therefore he's extinguishing the entire thing. If you want, I could say kiboy de mitzvah shani. Over here it's different, even though he is extinguishing, but it's part of the mitzvah of the offering of the wine, and so that is different. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here the following proof. The Tana Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov taught, Klape shenitna Torah litrom. The Torah says that you should remove the ashes from the mizbeach. Yachol yechabe v'yitrom. One might think that you can extinguish in order to remove those ashes. Amrit, we say, no, lo yechabe, you shouldn't extinguish. And so over here there's a mitzvah being done, but apparently you can't extinguish. And the Gemara says to that, Shani Hosam, it's different over there, because after the Yosef and Nutter, it's possible to sit and wait for it to go out on its own, so of course you cannot extinguish it. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here the following proof. The Brisa says, Yayin kedivrei Rabbi Akiva l'sefalim. Again, when it comes to wine, according to Rabbi Akiva, that's all poured to the basins. And shemen kedivrei Rabbi Tarfon l'ishim. And when it comes to oil, according to Rabbi Tarfon, it all goes to the fire. V'yo Tanya, and further we learned in a Brisa, Yayin nesach l'sefalim, oeno ela l'ishim. The wine, does it go to the basins? Does it go to the fires? Amrit lo yechabe. We say that you shouldn't do any extinguishing, so it seems clear from these sources that when it comes to the wine, you don't sprinkle it on the fire. And the Gemara says, Lo kash, it's not difficult. Ha Rabbi Yehuda, ha Rabbi Shimon. In one case we're following Rabbi Yehuda, in one case we're following Rabbi Shimon. And Rashi explains, Ha Rabbi Yehuda, do amar davar she'in miskavein aser. Rabbi Yehuda says, in general, when you do something unintentionally, but it's still aser, have a lo sechabe, afilu below miskavein, then it's a problem of extinguishing, even if that's not your intention. Hilkach akar leila mu'usei de'isha lemidrashe nachas ruach hu lefanai ki'ishim. Therefore, he darshans, when it says fire, it doesn't really mean that you're putting it on the fire, it just means it's a nachas ruach, like the fires. That's what it says in the Brisa and the Sifri. And Ha Rabbi Shimon, Shmuel holds like Rabbi Shimon, since it's not his intention to extinguish, so in such a situation, ein lo sichbe raya olav lesor, therefore it's not a problem. You can't say that lo sichbe becomes problematic. Lema'aker mashma'usa, the ishe, that we should uproot the simple understanding of the pasuk of ishe, misham koshya de lo sichbe, because of the difficulty we have in terms of you're not supposed to extinguish. Now maybe you'll say, even Rabbi Shimon says if you're in miskaven, you don't have intention, but it's for sure going to happen, that's a problem. That's called a psik reisha. After demazlif le betipin dakos mode, you'll use very small drops. Therefore, it's not necessarily a psik reisha. Hilkach, therefore, inami mechava betipim gasos davar shein miskavenu. So if it does go out, if it gets extinguished with larger drops, that's a davar shein miskaven. But the Gemara continues and asks, L'meimra de Shmuel Rabbi Shimon Svirule, but does that mean to say that Shmuel holds like Rabbi Shimon? Because Shmuel is the one again that says that you sprinkle it on the fire. Apparently it's a davar shein miskaven like Rabbi Shimon. But is that really true? V'amar Shmuel, but Shmuel said, Mechaben gacheles shel mateches b'rishos rabim, one can extinguish a coal of metal in rishos rabim, b'shvil shelo yazoku ba rabim, in order that the public should not be damaged. Rashi explains, gacheles shel mateches lav bas kiboy. The point over here is it's not really something you extinguish. It's made out of metal. V'isura d'Rabbanan hu de'ika. It's just an isur d'Rabbanan. Uv'mokum hezek ravim lo gazer Rabbanan. In the case of a damage to the public, the Rabbanan did not make a decree, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tzadi Beis Amud Aleph.